Hello and welcome to my podcast. Okay, here's the story. My name is Dee Burns. So in today's episode, I'm going to tell you the story of the dating app killer, Timothy Olson. He recently terrorized single women in the Wisconsin towns of Mount Pleasant, Racine, Franklin, and South Milwaukee. You're going to hear how he stole money, kidnapped women, and eventually murdered 2 women in our area. This story, every day, this story unfolds. More details and more details and more details. I'm going to go through a timeline today and kind of break it down for you on everything that's happened. And this story has an amazing ending to it, so you're going to want to hear it. So before I start, please understand that Timothy Olson has not been found guilty and all charges are pending. Everything that I discussed today is allegedly. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. I feel like I should have the Law and Order sound effect right there. Dun dun. Okay, so here's a few things you're going to need to remember before we start. At the time that these events were unfolding here it was in Waukesha, but in the central Wisconsin area, we had the whole Darrell Brooks case was happening. Now, if you don't know who Darrell Brooks is, he is a gentleman that drove through his SUV through the Waukesha Christmas parade last year, and he killed 6 people, injured a lot of people. And the whole city of Waukesha has been dealing with this for the last year. And so while this whole thing with Timothy Olson was going on, the news, TV, everything was dedicated to Darrell Brooks. His trial was on TV every day here. You could watch it. And it was just consuming the news cycle. So keep that in mind. As I go through the timeline, it's going to make sense why the public was not notified sooner than what they were when it came to Timothy Olson's events. So also in this story, you're going to hear me reference best friend. This is my best friend, and he doesn't like to be on the grid. He tries to stay off the grid as much as possible, and I respect that. And so I don't ever say his name, post his picture, anything on social media. I just call him best friend. So as I go through this story, you're going to hear me say best friend, and that's him. Okay. Finally, I'm going to give you a short background on Timothy Olson. He's 52 years old, and he lives with his mother. Now, I heard at one time, and I haven't heard it since, so I don't know if it's true, but my understanding is that his mom has poor health, and that's why he lived with her, was to help take care of her. And I understand that because I live with my son, Hunter, because of my MS and my health. He helps take care of me. And so I understand why a son at 52 would be living with his mother, because he's helping take care of her. I think, again, I haven't heard that statement made again, so I'm not sure. Timothy Olson has been in and out of jail since 1994. In 2006, he was caught and convicted of stealing over $1,000 and a car from a woman after drugging her after a date that they had gone on. This was back in 2006. So this has been going on. His behavior has a pattern. He was sentenced to prison for 8 years, but he only served 2, and then he was released. When he was released, this same woman that he had gone to jail for stealing from, she started warning other women that if you are currently dating or you have dated this man, Timothy Olson, in the past, you need to change all of the locks on your entire house, because apparently he had a pattern of stealing these women's keys, going and having copies made, and then he would put the keys back wherever they were at, a purse, a wall, whatever, without the woman knowing. So he would always have a set of keys to your house. So she was very vocal about, if you know this guy, you got to have your locks changed on your house. Okay, that was all in 2006. In early 2012, the police didn't know. They had reports of this man who would drug women and steal money. They didn't know who it was, so they nicknamed him Rip-Off Romeo. The local news had received many complaints about him. dating women and then stealing their money. So one of the women, she went to her local police department to file a complaint. Okay, now this is in 2012, so 10 years ago. So she goes to her local police department to file a complaint. The police told her, since she was in a relationship with him, it was not a criminal matter, but a civil matter. So she went and talked to the district attorney, and the district attorney refused to file charges because they said the same thing. It's not a criminal matter. It's a civil matter. You got to go to civil court. For some reason, at some point later in 2012, Timothy Olson was in Illinois. He was in an Illinois jail. He was accused of stealing another woman's medications. So I don't know if he was dating her. I don't know if he just went to her house and he was snooping through her medicine cabinet. Like we've done, and he just saw something he wanted and he stole it. I don't know. I don't know what that situation is. That was in Illinois. So he in 2012, he was in an Illinois jail, and obviously eventually he got out. Okay. So now I'm going to take you through a timeline, of the events that have happened here in the south central part of Wisconsin. So it all started on September 2nd. Remember that date, September 2nd. A woman who resides in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, she goes on a date with Olson. He ends up stealing her debit card and withdrawing $800 from her account. So apparently she met him on Match.com and she did everything right. She said, well, first of all, let me say, on Match.com, he went under the name Tim Wilson instead of Timothy Olson. He went under Tim Wilson. And like I said, she did everything right. She met him in person once or twice in public before the date that we're going to talk about. When they went on this date, they went to several establishments in Racine, Zion, Mount Pleasant, and Caledonia. Now, I'll just give you a little reference there. This is a suburb. Those towns are suburbs of Racine. So they kind of all run together. So it would not be unusual for them to go to several towns, to several different establishments. So at around 10 p.m., she asks Timothy Olson, can you drive me home? Because I'm tired and I just don't feel right. And then she blacked out. She doesn't remember anything else from that night. And like I said, she believes that she was drugged. So when she wakes up, she discovers Olson had taken her car. And so she contacts him about it. He claims he can't remember anything from the night before, and he blames her for drugging him. So he tells her, hey, I left your car at an Applebee's, and I don't know what town it was in, and you can go and get it there. So she apparently went and got it. And then at some point, she realized that there were 4 unauthorized withdrawals on her debit card that totaled $800 from 2 different gas stations. So she contacted law enforcement. They got involved. She initially thought that her card had been stolen from one of the bars that they had been to that night. So that was her thought at that time. But when the cops went to the gas stations and pulled the surveillance footage, it was obvious that Olson was withdrawing the funds from the ATMs at both locations. One was on September 2nd, around 10 o'clock at night, and the other one was on September 3rd at around 6 in the morning. So the detectives with the Mount Pleasant Police Department, they were unable to locate Timothy Olson's Match.com profile. So they just figured, okay, he's deactivated the account. So they couldn't find him that way. Okay, here's where it gets weird. I mean, the whole thing's weird, but this is really weird. November 8th. So we've gone from September 2nd to November 8th, which is over 2 months later. The Racine police and the medical examiner enter Timothy Olson and his mother's home. Okay. They remove a dead body. Both Timothy and his mother were present at the time that the body was removed. Apparently they were left there. I mean, there was no arrest made. The medical examiner and the cops just came in and removed the body, and that was it for November 8th. The very next day, November 9th, a warrant is issued for Olson's arrest in connection with the September 2nd incident. So the incident where he supposedly drugged this woman and stole her car and took out $800. Now on November 9th, like I said, 2 months later, issue a warrant for his arrest. They just had him the day before at his house. But the next day, for some reason, is when the warrant came through. I don't understand why it took so long. I don't get that part. But at this point, he faces multiple counts of felony personal ID theft for financial gain. The complaint notes that Olson also goes by several different aliases. The only one I have heard besides Timothy Olson was Timothy Wilson. I haven't heard any of the other aliases that he went under, but apparently November 9th is when they discovered he had several aliases. Still on November 9th, the Racine Police Department issues a safety alert regarding Olson, and it's to caution the women in Racine County and get the public's help in locating a male subject who has met women on dating apps and victimizes them, resulting in financial loss. Still, November 9th, we did not hear anything about this on the news, social media, alerts, nothing. November 17th, which is a week later, Olson is with 55-year-old Kim Mikulence. Him and Kim are in a bar. It's called Powers on 10th. It's here in South Milwaukee. It is literally at the end of my street. Okay. They go in the bar. They sit down. Kim is known in this bar. Apparently, this was one of the bars that she regularly attends. And she's got friends there. They go into the bar. They sit at the bar. They order drinks. The bartender makes the drinks, hands them to them, and Kim falls off the bar stool, passed out on the floor. And it was stated that she suffered an unknown medical emergency. So the bar calls 911. Timothy Olson looks at the bartender and says, "Hey, I'm going to go out to her car and get her inhaler." He leaves the bar and takes off. Does not come back. So surveillance video shows that, like I said, that Olson and Mikulence were sitting together at the bar. What they found out later was they had visited another bar before showing up at the bar here in South Milwaukee. Were at another bar, and I believe it was in Cudahy, which is just, a little bit, it's north of South Milwaukee. They all run together. They had gone to a bar in Cudahy, and they had sat there and had drinks. And they think that this was the place where he put a drug in her drink, was at this bar. And then apparently they left there and went to Powers on 10th here in South Milwaukee. It is believed, like I said, that Olson drugged Kim at the first bar. Emergency services were called, and Kim was taken to the hospital. This is on November 17th. She goes to the hospital. And like I said, this bar is literally at the end of my street. I remember when this happened because best friend came over after he got off work. It was about 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And he came walking in the front door and he goes, "Holy shit, there are police and ambulances at the bar at the end of the street." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And Channel 12, WISN, their news van, and Hannah Hilliard, which is one of the reporters, is standing out on the street, talking into the camera. And I was like, "What happened?" He's like, "I don't know. Turn the news on." So we turned the news on. And this was really the first time that the public was introduced to Timothy Olson and kind of what had been going on for the last 2 months. Now, keep in mind, again, the news cycle, the TV, everything had been consumed with Darrell Brooks. So this was all new to people in this area. Okay, so November 19th, 2 days later, Olson enters a restaurant called Milwaukee Burger Company at approximately 9:30 at night. He enters the restaurant wearing a hoodie with the hood up and sunglasses on. The gal seats him and he orders food. But before his food can arrive, he unscrews, I don't know why he would do this, but he unscrews the light bulb in the fixture above his table, and he complains to the server that the restaurant's too bright. Olson eats his food. He hangs out in the restaurant until after closing, which they close at 10 o'clock. I looked it up on the internet, and they close at 10 o'clock at night. So he was there after 10 o'clock. And then all of a sudden, he just gets up and leaves without paying his bill. The manager calls the police and files a complaint. November 21st, 2 days later, after the incident with the light bulb, the Racine Police Department update their initial safety alert to say that Olson has been linked to the incident with Kim Mikulence in the bar here in South Milwaukee. They state that this marks the third woman that Racine police are aware of from other jurisdictions who ended up unconscious while in the presence of Timothy Olson. November 22nd, the next day, Kim Mikulence dies at the hospital. Her death is right now, starting on November 22nd until now, is under investigation by the South Milwaukee Police Department. And we are still awaiting autopsy results, which I can't believe, not autopsy, toxicology results. And I can't believe it takes that long. I really can't. I mean, they must test for everything. But yeah, we're still waiting on toxicology reports to see what exactly was in her system. So now the South Milwaukee Police Department and the Racine County Sheriff Department are looking for Olson. And they've issued many safety alerts at this point via the news, social media. I get alerts like on my phone of, stuff that's happening. If it's like bad weather or if they're looking for somebody or if the public is in danger, you get these alerts on your phone. And that's what we've been getting. Okay, so November 23rd, the next day, Olson finds his next victim in Franklin. And again, Franklin is another city that is in this area. Like I said, we're just in an area where all the cities run in together. You can be driving and literally go through 6 or 7 cities just because they're all together. So he finds this victim at a bar in Franklin. She's 79 years old. He goes up to her and he says, "Hey, I'd like to buy you a drink." And she's like, no, thank you. Then she decides that she's got to get home. I mean, 79. What are you doing in a bar? Damn, sit at home and drink. I mean, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, she leaves the bar and he approaches her in the parking lot with a gun and he forces her into her car. He held her hostage for a number of hours, is what she told the police. So they drive to at least one ATM. He takes her cards and withdraws cash. And if I remember right, I think it was $800, but I don't know for sure. That's pure speculation. Okay, November 28th, 5 days later. Now, remember, this all started on September 2nd, and now we're at November 28th. I mean, it's been almost 3 months that this has all been going on. And the guy is still in the area. I mean, he didn't get in his car and go to Iowa or go to Illinois or drive to Canada. I mean, we are in Wisconsin. We are right on the Wisconsin-Canadian border. I'm not, but Wisconsin borders Canada. I mean, he stayed in this area and that just blows my mind. But anyway, November 28th, 5 days later, Olson is spotted back in Franklin at a restaurant called the Grill Shack. He asked one of the employees to use the phone and the employee gave him the phone. They have surveillance video. And on this surveillance video, you can see him placing a call and he's standing in line for 30 minutes. And so he finishes his call. He gives the phone back to the employee. By this time, his food is done and it's in a bag on the counter. And he grabs his food and he runs out without paying. So the manager calls the Franklin Police Department to file a complaint. And the police come and they get information from the phone and the video surveillance system. November 29th, the very next day. Okay, so I'm going to read what was posted on a local news website about Timothy Olson's capture. And then I'm going to tell you the real story. 2 things to remember in this story, okay? The time of the capture, what the news says the time of the capture was, and the words nearby condominium complex. Remember those. So now here, I'm going to read you now the posting from WISN Channel 12's website. Officers spot a man believed to be Olson pushing a bicycle on the 7,000 block of South 35th Street in Franklin at around 10:15 a.m. Remember that time, 10:15. As officers approach, he flees into a nearby condominium complex and after a brief struggle is tased and taken into custody. Okay, here's the real story. Best friend is working at said condominium complex. Best friend is an installer for a local siding company. And this building is getting new siding put on it. So this particular day, best friend's not feeling that good. He's been battling something. I don't know. Lately, he's been battling something. No, it's not COVID. He just hasn't felt good. And his boss knew it. He could tell by looking at him that, he's not feeling good. So he said to him, hey, why don't you cut today? And I will have so-and-so install. And he's like, oh, thank you, because I don't feel good today. I would rather just stay on the ground and cut the siding. His boss says, that's fine. It's very unusual. It's very rare. I won't even say unusual. I will say rare for him to be cutting. He's almost always up on a plank, putting the siding on. But today he's on the ground. At around 10 o'clock, best friend looks up and he sees a guy. And the guy wasn't really running, but he was moving quicker than a slow walk. And he's coming up these stairs. And, at the top of these stairs is where best friend is cutting the siding. He's got his cut table and, all of his stuff laid out. And he sees this guy coming up these stairs. And he thinks, oh, this guy must live here because he's walking up these stairs towards the door that's on the side of the building. All of a sudden, best friend sees a cop at the bottom of the stairs with his gun drawn. And he's yelling. He's pointing it at this guy. And he's yelling, freeze, police. Another police officer comes up the small hill, which is like on the left-hand side of best friend, with his gun drawn, pointed at this guy. And he's yelling, freeze, police. So they're yelling at this guy to get on the ground. Best friend has his hands up, but just like at waist level. They're not up above his head. They're like at waist level, but he's got them up so that the cops can see his hands. And he's very slowly stepping back away from the situation. As he's stepping back, another officer comes around the corner behind him and he yells to this other guy, taser, 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 get down. This guy plops down. He didn't sit down. He plopped down on the ground. And when he did that, he sat right on best friend's tool belt. And so best friend says to the cop who's standing next to him with the taser, he says, hey, he's sitting on my tool belt. I've got a hammer and knives in that tool belt, so be careful. Well, the cop with the taser tells Olson, roll over on your stomach and, put your hands behind your back. And he wouldn't do it. He would just sat there. And so then they tased him. Now, I will say that this guy had on a puffy jacket and, one of those big, the big puffy winter jackets. That's what he had on. So when they shot the taser, it just went into the jacket. It didn't go into him. So there, it didn't really affect him. Come to find out, this is Timothy Olson. This whole thing that's been going on where best friend is working is the capture of Timothy Olson. Now, you remember how I said before on the news website, they said that it happened at 10:15. At 10:09, I get a text message from best friend. Here is what it said. I'm going to read it to you. They just caught that guy that was drugging women and stealing their money. And that one gal who died in the bar up the street from you. It was literally 5 feet away from me. Tell you all about it later. I got that text message at 10:09. If his capture happened at 10:15, how would I get that text message? So best friend said really it kind of started around 10:05. They were about 10 minutes off on the news website. When I got that message, it was really weird to me because, like I said before, best friend is always on the plank putting siding on buildings. He's very rarely, never on the ground. So I'm thinking, okay, 5 feet away, he must be up on the plank. This must have taken place below him. And then when he came over that night, he was telling me the story and I'm like, it was right next to you. And he's like, yeah, I told you it was 5 feet away. I said, I know, but usually you're on the plank. And he's like, yeah, I usually am. So anyway, it was just weird. It just all happened right now. Now, talk about a coincidence. Okay, I'm not one that believes in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. But I feel like this was a real coincidence. Best friend saw he didn't see it, but he saw the aftermath of what happened at the bar at the end of my street. And then he was there when this whole capture went down. And it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, to me, it's just so weird. Your best friend lives on the same street where one of the incidences happened, and you were there when he was captured. It's weird. It kind of boggles my mind. So in Franklin alone, excuse me, Olson faces charges of kidnapping, 3 burglaries, and identity theft. Olson has been interviewed by detectives from Franklin, Racine, and South Milwaukee. And Milwaukee County just added resisting arrest to the list of charges. I think it was last week or the week before, which I don't quite understand because this guy has got so many charges on him. He's got 2 dead bodies. I don't understand why you would add resisting arrest to that. I just don't think it's going to add to the final sentencing at all. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but this has all been going on. We're still seeing what new charges are coming, what the latest information that comes in is going to add to these charges. So that, my friend, is the story. So thank you so much for listening today. I'm going to end the show on a happy note with my cheesy joke of the day. I will let you know I have self-proclaimed myself as Wisconsin's cheesy joke queen. And I did this way before you ever heard about dad jokes. I have rules for my cheesy jokes. I can only tell one a day. Once I tell my cheesy joke for the day, I can't tell anymore. And sometimes I find better ones. So I have to pick and choose wisely. Here's the joke. Where did Captain Hook purchase his hook? At the secondhand store. Okay. Yeah. You can use that joke for anything you want. Your kids can tell it, whatever you want. Thank you so much for listening today. Next week, I'm going to be discussing neighbors from hell. And as I was recording this today, I was kind of hoping that my neighbors upstairs were going to make noise because they are the neighbors from hell. And I wanted you folks to know what I hear every day, but they've been pretty quiet. So you won't want to miss this episode because even if you have terrible neighbors now, you'll be glad you don't have these neighbors. I'm going to tell you the stories that I found on the internet. And yeah, it is insane. If you liked what you heard today, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscription button, and turn on notifications so you'll know when a new episode is dropped. Also, please leave a comment and please be nice. And let me know if you have any ideas for new shows. You can also follow this podcast on YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit my website at okayhereisthestory.com. I'm Dee Burns, and I hope you all have an amazing week.